The verse says here, I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the almighty hand hath afflicted me? See, we see this story of a woman whose perception was loss. All she could focus on was what she had lost, what she didn't have. And we know in life that when things happen, when tragedy happens, unfortunately, humanity is to focus on all that we lose, all that we don't have anymore, except for the things that we still have. And I'm not going to say that's a bad thing because it's normal for us to focus on the negative, right? It's normal for us to focus on the things that we have lost. My parents a couple years ago had a fire and literally lost everything that they had, burnt down to the ground, all their clothes, all of the things that they had that we got from Europe when we were stationed in Lakenheath, everything. Even the pictures were burnt to a crisp except for just pictures that were barely usable. But thankfully, they're going to be able to salvage those. And my mom wept for a long time thinking about all the negative in her life and all the things that she had lost and how she wasn't going to be able to focus on the good. And we see the very same thing here with Naomi, how she and her husband left Israel in a time of famine where fear drove them out of their land. It drove them from the very place that they were born, where they had the blessings of God, called the house of God in Bethlehem. And they decided to go to a foreign land, and the foreign land was actually their enemy at times because the Moabites were always constantly striving with them. And we see this as brethren when we fight with our own family. And so they went there to start a life because they wanted to be able to provide for themselves. And when they were there was a young lady named Ruth who just had something a little bit different going on in her life, mostly a heart thing. She desired more than the life that she had been given. She desired more than the tragic environment. And we see here is that when Ruth was in her nation, the nation of the Moabites were probably bitter because their very beginning was from incest. See, they were the children of an incest couple where the father had relations with their daughters, and I'm sure they never got past the gossip that was always plaguing them. You were a nation that was coming out of something bad. And Ruth grew up in this environment, and Naomi, as she goes, not focusing on what God was doing, she goes and Naomi ends up having a tragic experience where she loses both of her sons and her husband. And see, during this time, Naomi was turning in that scripture we just read. Her focus was on the loss. Her focus was on everything that she had lost. And at that moment, and we see this when we're mourning, even the loss of a family member or a job, all we can do is look to the despair of where we are and not what's ahead of us. And that's human nature. We see, Ruth was the answer for Naomi's problem. And Naomi didn't see it at the time because Ruth was there during her time of despair. And Naomi made herself bitter at the time, but unfortunately, she couldn't see past the circumstances. And see, Naomi had another daughter, of course, who decided not to go with her. And both of these daughters wanted to go with Naomi when she decided to go back home. And I say this when she said, I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home empty. This was her thought process. And we see this too, even when we leave the house of God full, when we leave our circumstances full, and we pour our lives out in circumstances, when we come back to the house of God, sometimes we're empty. Sometimes we need to be filled. And God gives us the Holy Ghost so that we can pour ourselves out into the people's lives outside of us. And sometimes circumstances push us to a place where we have to pour out. You see, in Naomi, we know during that time they didn't have the Spirit of God like we did. It was still guiding them, but it wasn't filling them like a pot where it runs over and the blessings of God begin to flow out to other people's lives. And sometimes if we don't understand that when we leave full and we go out empty, that we don't come back to the house of God to be refilled. We've got to make sure that we are together. And see, Naomi was focusing on self. She was focusing on her. She was focusing on her surroundings and her problem. It was all inward. It was all me, woe is me, woe is me. And see, the biggest thing with her is probably, oh, I'm not going to go back home full. I'm not wealthy. I don't have a husband. I don't have anything else. And all she's focusing on is I'm going home empty. But here was Ruth, a woman who came from a reputation of a nation that was probably always hearing this situation. And she says, I'm going to go with you, Naomi. Your God shall be my God, and your people shall be my people. And I want to be where you are. And the whole time we see, and I think of Ruth as like the Spirit of God that is sitting next to us, nuzzling us, poking on us, saying, I'm here. I'm helping you in your time of despair. I'm helping you when you're going through it. Because that's kind of what Ruth was like the Spirit of God, a comforter to her. But at the time, she couldn't see that because it was all about self. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's our human nature to focus inward. But we can't remain there. We have to take ourselves and push ourselves. I was reading a story the other day where a woman was in a car fire. She had 5 kids and a husband, and she was in a car fire, and her body was burnt over 80% of her body. She was in the hospital for weeks on end, and she didn't know what she was going to do with her life, and it was horrible for her family, and they had to go through all the traumatic experiences that she was going through. But at the end of it all, she was weeping, and she was focusing selfward, and then all of a sudden, she gets a phone call from a burn unit in a hospital saying, why don't you volunteer for burn unit people? Why don't you go and volunteer your time so that you're not focused inward and you can go and minister to others who are in your situation? And this woman ended up going to this hospital, and she devoted hours of her time comforting those who were in her situation, focusing on the outward ability that she had. And years later goes by, her and her husband were granted a reward for their diligence, for their kindness, their faithfulness to helping the broken. You see, tragedy can be something that looks bad at the time, but it can be something that drives us into change, drives us into purpose, drives us into a place where we can be used in mighty ways, and it takes us out of self-looking and focuses on the need of others. When my heart problem happened, I was all down and trodden, and I was thinking, oh, it was about me. I don't want to leave my kids. I don't want to do this. It's about me. But when I started to focus on what can I change, what is happening to me now to where I can do something to make a difference, and it made me go 180 degrees in a different direction so that I could focus outwardly. And that journey has been a blessing to me. And I see that in so many multiple lives. That Nick guy who has no arms and legs, he was born without arms and legs, but what did he do? He pushed himself day in and day out to stop focusing inward and what he didn't have, to now being one of the greatest speakers across our nation and the world, having a wife and 3 children. You see, tragedy pushed him in a direction that said, I am not here for myself. I'm here for others. Naomi was here, and yes, she had a tragedy happen in her life, but her purpose was far greater than herself, far greater than her moment. And it was the very bitterness and the very problem that she had was helping her to focus later on what God was doing. Because when she came home, she thought she came home empty-handed, but she came home with a woman who was willing to make a sacrifice to do whatever it takes, that Naomi would have praise. Naomi would have an ability that would bring her to a place of joy and happiness. And for Naomi saying this, her presence right now obviously meant very little to Naomi. She said, I have nothing at all, Naomi declared. She was sidelined, silent, and ignored, Ruth was. And her sacrifice seemed to go unnoticed. Even know that Ruth had a chance to go back to her people, find another husband, and have more children. But her desire was to be the comforter to Naomi, to go and leave all that she could have had to better the future for Naomi and the people of God. You see, Ruth was looking outward. She was looking at the possibilities that she could achieve by being a blessing to someone else and looking past what she could have had. I wish I could say that I had Ruth's desires, but I've been a Naomi before. Haven't we all? And it seems tragedy after tragedy, it changes me from a Naomi to a Ruth. And I love it because I want to be more like Ruth. I'm not saying that I'm 100% there yet, but I'm striving for that. And I want to look at the possibilities that I have in my tragedy and my trauma and turn it around for something greater than myself, because God has each one of us here for a purpose, for a plan, and for a life to touch. And you may only touch a few, but some of us may touch thousands. You never know the possibility that you have in your life to make a difference. And when we're suffering a heavy loss, all we can think about is we no longer have the belongings. We've lost a loved one. We've lost a job. We've lost our health, our home, our financial security. But truly a painful situation, we begin to narrate not having lost something, but everything is completely empty. We have nothing anymore. Yet our Lord is still there. He's standing right beside us. We're not empty. The old advantage of seeing a glass half full or half empty applied to Naomi, and it applies equally to us today. And although Naomi wasn't returned to her extended family as a well-provided woman, she had Ruth's love and presence, which symbolizes her daily necessities. I can't say that right. Sorry. She could not say thank you to God for Ruth because her heart was burdened. Now I want to turn the story to another situation. Joseph. We got men and women in here, so I want to try to apply both male and female to this principle. I always like doing that. You see, Joseph was a kid who had a lot of joy, a lot of excitement, very immature, and he just wanted to live life. He was happy, cheerful, and he had a promise from God, and he wanted everyone to know about it. And I'm not going to get into the whole story of Joseph, but I want to talk about the blessing that Joseph received. You see, Joseph was born in a time where his father became very prosperous. Joseph ended up being sold out from his own brethren, and he ends up being captive in a place of a prison and a place that wasn't his own. Now, there are some of you that are from here, and there are some of you who aren't. Some of you are transplants like me. Joseph ended up being transplanted in Egypt. He was placed there outside of his own home, his own family. He was away from everything he knew. And God began to take his life, and he went through lots of trials and tribulations. And the whole time he was in prison, he learned a lot of valuable details that prepared him for the place that he was going to be. Joseph focused outward on serving. What can I do to help others? What can I do? In every tragic experience, even being 2 more years in prison after he was hoping that he would break free from that jail. 2 more years, he waited patiently, hoping that God would get him out of there, not knowing that he was going to be second in command, not knowing that Joseph was going to be the one that brought prosperity and wealthiness to the people. Not just Egypt, but his own family. You see, Ashnath bore him 2 sons in Egypt, and he called the firstborn Manasseh. Joseph said, God has made me forget completely my hardship and my parental home. You see, he was there, and his first son gave him a blessing, saying, all my hardship is now forgotten because I have this beautiful baby boy, and I don't have my parental home anymore, but I have this blessing, this package. And God made him forget it. That was Genesis 41:51. And then Manasseh is connected to the verbal root neshach, which refers to forgetting and letting go. A very common usage of the word describes something being relieved of a debt. You see, he had a debt to his brothers because he kind of did some things. And through his maturity, God relieved him of the debt. He never spoke the things evil of his brethren. He waited patiently on the Lord to take and transfer all the things that had gone wrong in his life, and to begin to focus on the positive. The positive meaning is better parallel to the second son named Ephraim, which means made me fruitful. This is what I loved about it, because those of you who are transplanted, even if you're not, when the naming Ephraim, Joseph said, God hath made me fertile in a land of my affliction. You see, in his land of affliction, God began to bless him. God began to bring him fruitfulness. God began to bring out joy and fruitfulness in a place where all the despair and all the trials and every attack of the enemy came against him, trying to destroy his very life. God rose him up, and in the very place of despair, Joseph became a man of fruitfulness. And see, we have to realize this, and in every trial that we have, every situation that is in our life, everything we go through can bring us fruitfulness in times of affliction. As 7 fruitful harvest years came to an end, it had become obvious that Joseph was not a lunatic, and that Pharaoh had been wise in appointing him to the task of setting aside massive quantities of food. And when the people of Egypt thought of Joseph, they naturally thought of wealth and prosperity. The meaning of these names have everything to do with Joseph's awareness that it was God who set him free and made him fruitful. In Hebrew, Egypt is a place of confinement and limitation, where someone cannot prosper. God's faithfulness to Jacob's children is best seen in Joseph's ability to survive and thrive against all odds in the land of confinement and limitation. You see, wherever we are, whatever our circumstances are, they can mean confinement and limitation if we allow that very thought to limit us there, to place us in that place of confinement and limitation. But we cannot allow our circumstances to cause that. We need to allow our circumstances to drive us into the purpose that God has us coming to. And some storms, I would say a lot of storms, are ordained of the Lord. Why? Because some storms uncover things. They uncover value. They uncover beauty. They uncover things just like diamonds that are in the coal that are being pressured and crushed. We know pearls are made in the ocean, in the mouth of the I can't say it. What is it? Clam. Thank you. And so these things are happening, and they're going on, and God is doing this in our lives, and we are our jewels and crowns that are going to be in His crown. We're being made in the fires of life, and we're being made. But here's the thing: is our whole focus needs to be on what God is doing. We sing that song, He's the potter, we are the clay. If we know and trust that the Lord is doing something, we can be a people that is fruitful in the times of affliction. We can be like Ruth and Naomi, where we turn our focus from bitterness into joy and understanding, because when Naomi really finally understood what God was doing, he said, "Oh, wait a minute," she said. "Ruth, go glean in the field. Go glean in the field. Go on." Boaz is the kinsman redeemer. And so then she finally starts seeing the blessing and what's happening with Ruth. She's saying, "Wait a minute. I was so focused on me being inward that I'm now starting to see the hand of God." And so now she's like, "Okay, I'm going to help her." And she realized that the whole time, this was her blessing. And so we have to pay attention to the people that God places in our lives, the people that are next to us, the people that God has for us. And sometimes we want to fight those people. I don't want this person in my life because she tried to make Ruth stay. I don't want you with me. Go home. Do your own thing. Get away. I want to be better. But Ruth's like, "No way. I'm going to stand by you." See, God fills our soul and our life with countless blessings, but in difficult times, it's hard to say thank you to Him. And a lot of the people of Israel fell in the desert because they were not thankful. And I'm not saying that we're all going to be condemned right now because we're not thankful at times. It's okay to be sad and happy at the same time. We can have that. Naomi had that. And there's nothing wrong. We don't serve a God that zaps us down and kills us. Yes, we need to stay focused on serving Him, because when we do the things of the flesh, death will eventually come. And it's our desire to be together as a family, to strive together as a family. Some of us are wounded, some of us are half wounded, some of us are whole, and some of us are just getting started out. But we are a body that is collectively together, and we help one another. Because even in Joseph's circumstances, Naomi and Joseph both had situations where their lives were a blessing others. Your life, my life, is about blessing others. It's about the people's lives that we're involved in, the community that we're involved in, and we need to stay focused on that. His presence and promise are a burden of our worry for our mind, but He fills us with knowledge, and He is in control. I read this quote from Socrates. "The secret of change is to focus all your energy not fighting the old, but building on the new." We spend a lot of time fighting the old stuff. What didn't happen? What could have been? Why am I here? I did it. I don't want to be in the north. I don't want to be in the north. I want to go back to Texas. It's warmer there. I robbed myself, I think. But God kept turning my face to the right direction, kept showing me what the possibilities were. And I believe that God is trying to get us to see that even and Paul said this, he said, I have a thorn in my side. You see, sometimes God allows thorns to bring change, to bring circumstances to where we can grow and we could thrive. Have you ever heard of a hothouse rose where they throw it in a predicament where it has to grow really fast? Sometimes where that hothouse rose, they still have thorns. Being human is a messy thing. We're all messy. Some of us just hide it better than others. Right? So I want to say this. The joy of the Lord is our strength. And we should have the joy of the Lord. It should be the very focus that we have. And I'm getting ready to end here. The joy comes from God, but happiness comes from us. Okay? Happiness comes from us. And a whole world out there needs to see our happy. Okay? I'm not trying to be mean. We have joy, but they need to see our happy. Happy is something that we do. Okay? Joy helps us to be happy. I'm going to read a couple quotes out of my notes. Happiness and freedom begin with a simple, clear understanding of one principle. Some things are in your control and some things aren't. And you know what? That's okay. And what you need to do is see, what do I do with this now? What is this teaching me? What value can I get out of my circumstances? What can I do? What is God saying that I need to do to be able to bless someone else? Our past can be akin to an unwanted house guest. We can't wait for them to leave only to find years later that we are still cleaning up their mess. Our past may be unique, but unwanted memories pestering us. We're unable to alter what happened, but we can alter it with an altar. But we can change the impact it has on the present future. However, changing our perception of the past doesn't mean that we need to rip out the roots and forget who we are, what we've experienced. Instead, the strategy to adopt our past, to identify the dead branches of our past and saw them off as we grow. You see, we don't do the sawing. He does. Read John chapter 15. He is the vine, we are the branches. If you remain in me, you can have anything that you ask. But you have to obey him and his commandments. So you follow his voice, obey him. And when you are in him, he says he cleans us with his word and he cuts off the bad branches so that you can produce more fruit. So he's the one that does it. You don't have to do it for yourself. All you have to do is focus on him. Happiness is not a reward. It's a consequence of our thoughts, actions, and shifts in perception. Often we try to accumulate what doesn't actually increase our happiness. Research has repeatedly found that when money can buy some things, some happiness, it's rarely much as we think. Focusing on increasing our possessions can actually decrease our happiness. In a particular study, and psychologists, the people who strive to accumulate money, possessions, and status displayed signs of distress and poor well-being. In contrast, those who focus on personal growth, close friendships, and community experience more happiness. In short, if you want a 7-figure happiness, then shift your focus to increasing your experiences, close relationships, and impacting your world. We don't chase money, we chase God. Right? Joseph never looked for riches. Joseph attained riches because his focus was on God. I know there's so much on these notes, but I feel like maybe I need to end now. One more last thing, and then we'll come to the front. Happiness is the experience of gratitude, contentment, joy, well-being, as well as the sense of that life has meaning and purpose greater than ourselves. Here we go again, greater than ourselves. So we may not hear thank you for everyone whose life we have touched. You may not. You may not know the impact that you have, the ripple that happens. You may not know that. You may not even know what testimony you bring to the world. I think I don't do anything, and I hear a lot of people say, you have no idea. You're right. I'm blind to it. I hear it from wonderful people I know that sit here in this audience. I should say, or not audience, but it feels like an audience sometimes. They're staring at me. From the people who sit in here, lovely people. You are all amazing. So let's think of this. We may not hear thank you from everyone and touch the blessings of the presence of people that we help or resources. But let God hear these words from us today. He will never leave us empty. He will never leave us empty. He's there. He's with us. And I'll leave this one last thing as we come. I want us to just be thankful today. I want you to realize that God is changing you. He's using you. We're all messy people. We're a body that is together collectively, and we're doing what God wants us to do, and He's growing us, and that's growing pains. That's some of the branches being cut off. I want you to change your perception today, but more than anything else, happiness is something that you do. Happiness is something that I do. Everyone is born worthy of happiness. Our job in life, an individual level, is to find our own inner happiness, and a collective level to help others feel happier through our kindness. And so as we come today, as we worship the King of Kings, we worship God, think about this. There are 10 galaxies outside of our own. 10 other galaxies with billions of stars. Billions and billions and billions of stars. And 10 other whole galaxies. I saw this yesterday on a post that we know of. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, we limit our God. We limit our God. So I say this today. If you have trauma, you can alter it today in the altar. If you have the wrong perception, you can come to this altar today and you can change your perception. If you just want to thank the Lord, you can come and do that. And if you need wisdom in whatever circumstances or thing that God is allowing in your life, come and seek wisdom because God has the answer. And it doesn't have to be at the altar. You can stay in your chair. But let's just find His will today as we worship Him to the song that she plays, to magnify Him and to give Him. In Corinthians 5:15, if you want to bring that up, we can read that really quick. I feel dumb because I said audience. I'm a good friend. Sorry, you guys. I feel like Moses sometimes. And that He died for all, that they which should live, not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto Him which died for them and rose again. You see, we all are here for a perfect plan. We are all here as a masterpiece to give glory unto God and to help one another. And our world needs to see our joy and our happiness.